I'm going live today here on Monday, November 29th at 5:15 p.m. in San Diego, California. I'm talking today about the upcoming solar eclipse in Scorpio in Jyeshta Nakshatra. That's happening. You see, this is 12/3 at 23:19. It's actually 12/4 early in the morning on the West Coast on December 4th. And for much of the world, east of San Diego, it's on December the 4th, right? So you can see it's happening in Jyeshta Nakshatra in Scorpio, very early degrees of Jyeshta. The sun and moon come together. So we're going to talk about this. You see Mars is in Libra, very last degrees. Mercury is also in Scorpio, Venus in Sagittarius, Saturn in Capricorn, and Jupiter in early degrees of Aquarius. And so this is going to be what we're discussing today. I wanted to also make sure to invite everyone to this upcoming 2022 forecast. This is a free web class that I just put together. I do these forecasts every year, and we're at that time now where I'm getting it together. Your personal forecast for 2022 free web class. You can go to that link I just put. It's actually very easy. 2022vedicastrology.com. You go there, you just click register now, and you can register. You select an event date and time, and then you just go ahead and do that. And you're going to learn about some very important things, 10 of the most important shifts, practical thinking in progress, Mercury, 6 months in Earth signs in 2022. It's another great year, folks, especially for those of you who haven't lost your mind to everything in the external world. Yes, there's a lot of challenges, but guess what? I don't know about you, but, I had a pretty good year in 2021. Yeah, things are intense, but, for those of you who are living a spiritual life, what did you think? What did you think this was, right? 6 months, half the year, Mercury is going to be in Earth signs. That's fantastic. He's exalted in Earth signs, very powerful there. So I'm going to talk about these shifts and transits next year. Elevating connection to devotion. Venus is direct in Sagittarius in early, in the early part of the year, because Venus is going to go retrograde. But then, so I'm going to be talking about Venus in Sagittarius, again, very devotional, then obsessed with the self, rejecting others as the nodes change signs and move into the Aries Libra axis in March 19th. Then mystical teachings and connections, Jupiter in Pisces. So Jupiter goes into Pisces next year. He'll be there for an entire year. And so for all 12 signs, including yours, I'm also going to talk about the transit of Jupiter through very mystical Pisces for the next year. So again, that's going to be totally different based on your ascendant. So you'll get that also for free the next year. The Jupiter mystical transit through Pisces, you will learn about and understand. Then committing to the future world, Saturn is going to poke his head in Aquarius, a kind of foreshadowing of the next 3-year cycle, starting at the end of April until mid-July. So again, Saturn pokes his head in Aquarius, and he goes retrograde. I'm going to talk about that. Also, then we have a solar eclipse in Aries in Bharani Nakshatra, obsessive with the self and winning. That's going to be the theme of this eclipse next April. Then cosmic blowups and war. Mars and Rahu are very close from July 16th until early August. So again, Mars, Rahu, very close in the summer next year. You want to know about that. Reversal of duties and fortunes. Both Saturn and Jupiter are retrograde from the end of July until around the end of October next year. Again, both of them. So it's going to be, very important to focus on that. Then obsessive scrutiny of others. That's the solar eclipse in Libra in Swati Nakshatra, October 25th. And then fiery values and interests. Mars goes retrograde. Mars, a very powerful retrograde cycle starts October 30th in Gemini, Mrigashira Nakshatra, until January of 2023. So again, a long Mars retrograde cycle starts as well. So I'm going to talk about these 10 things. You want to really know about this. I do these every year. And, I put a, little paragraph here that says this, going into last year, 2021, all I heard was, if you thought 2020 was bad, you just wait. Well, you know what? The astrologers who said all that were wrong. And I was right. Now, again, if you really think that 2021 was worse, don't forget about 2020. We were locked in our house for half the year. We had, sort of mobile morgues all over the place. The world shut down. We had upheavals all over the place. There was all kinds of stuff. So this year, 2020 was much better and a relative return to normal after a worldwide pandemic. And I said as much last year. I could have said anything. There were people predicting riots and, social chaos and blowups after Trump election and all kinds of stuff, gloom and doom last year. I wasn't one of them, right? I've been watching this stuff for a long time, and I've been doing these forecasts for a long time. And again, those of you who, as soon as I posted this as well, so many, not so many, but a few comments like, oh, well, I think it was worse for me. So again, if you're going to just have your life revolve around certain things, like who's president, or if you still have this idea that the stuff with the, with the pandemic is fascism, and just, again, if that's the kind of thing that's going on, then, that's what's going to happen. But by any sort of objective standard and measure, it's very hard to say that this year has been worse. It just really is. So again, if you want this kind of look into life, and an objective look at how things are going to play out, again, not just hypnotized and caught up in the world, but also living a life that's harmonized and balanced. Again, as you see in the forecast, I'm talking about things, of course, all the social situations are included, but it's also about not losing yourself in all of that, right? So again, it's all free, 2020 VedicAstrology.com, and you'll get that for free. So let's get into this forecast here. And for this eclipse. Now, again, this is a pretty powerful eclipse. They all are, but one of the reasons this one is so intense, as well as the last one, because the last one, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we had the exalted moon eclipse. Remember? We were saying this is going to be kind of a case study in, exaltation and debilitation, and literally those dignities, because the eclipse a couple of weeks ago, the lunar eclipse was where the moon was up here, very early degrees of Taurus, where the moon is at its highest exaltation point, like 3 degrees of Taurus, right? So it was very much an embodied sort of, connection to the heart and family, and cutting through the nature of the emotions where we tend to get attached. That nakshatra of Kritika is where we can have a lot of detachment from all of our emotional drama. And I contrasted that point up here with this point down here. If the last eclipse was where we can have a lot of discrimination and at the same time have a lot of connection to the heart, which is the moon in Taurus, but the discrimination and the discernment to cut through all of the attachment, which is Kritika, that's what the last eclipse was about. And this one is very different. This one is the moon is in Scorpio, where it's in its debilitated sign, because we have all of that attachment, all the stuff I just said that was exalting to the moon, which was to feel connection, to feel peace. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, I was saying one of the main qualities of that exalted moon in Taurus is Santosha. Santoshima. I was talking about my guru Amma as Santoshima, the peaceful, contented Ma. You can see this literally embodied in cows, in animal, really all animals, but you look at a cow just sitting there, peaceful, stable. Contrast that with the animal, the scorpion. It's not peaceful or stable. It hides in holes. It's vulnerable. The scorpion is the smallest of all of the zodiac animals. by far. The scorpion, it's a little bug. It's a little insect. Most of them are, a few inches long. They're not that big. Now, I know they look fierce, and in Western astrology especially, there's a lot of kind of romance around Scorpio. This is probably, there are a couple signs that I think have the most different between Western and Vedic astrology. Scorpio is definitely one of them, because Western astrology, there's all kinds of higher octaves, the eagle and all kinds, phoenix rising from the ashes and all this. Again, these are, I wouldn't say they're wrong, but in many ways, Western astrology, I think, really kind of misses the fundamental principle of Scorpio, which is, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with this, but it's a little tough bug that has survived for eons. The physiology of a Scorpio, or of a scorpion and a crab, and even like fish, the water signs haven't changed. They're very ancient, enduring, tough creatures that survive in very different ways. The scorpion, especially, it lives in holes to protect itself. It's always afraid of getting, stepped on or other kinds of things by the big four-legged creatures walking all over the place. So in many ways, the kind of psychology of Scorpio and planets in Scorpio is that psychology of self-protection, because there's an awareness of our vulnerability. We feel vulnerable. We feel like we can get stepped on. We can get easily crushed. This is the kind of psychology of Scorpio. Now, again, what they do in response to that, and the power of Scorpio, is to then have the courage to get engaged and to come out from the hole and find a way to engage with life, right? So, but you want to really look at this differently, and opposite of, like, for example, the Taurus might be the biggest animal in the zodiac, a bull. In fact, it's easy to think of something like a lion, but if you look in the jungles, Taurus is a cow, but look at something like a water buffalo, or they're bigger than lions. Watch a lion try to take down a water buffalo, right? Lion is a big animal, but a cow, the biggest lion is not as big as the biggest cow or bovine creature. So the cows might be the biggest of all of the animals in the zodiac, and the scorpion the smallest. So if you think of a scorpion and a cow, the cow would probably not be afraid of the scorpion if it even saw it. It might just step on it and not even see it there. That's why the scorpions live in holes. So I'm talking about this. These animal symbols are really important because they show a deeper psychological and a sort of embodied psychology. And I say embodied psychology because the zodiac signs are really related to our life on Earth and our karma and that feeling of how we are incarnating here. And then you have the nakshatras behind it, which are much more transcendent energies, transcendent forces that are coming through the zodiac signs. And so this tenacious, tough, courageous little bug that will hang in there and, want to transform is really the kind of psychology of Scorpio. And by the way, a lot of Scorpio people with planets in Scorpio, sometimes they don't really like that explanation, but begrudgingly they have to go, okay, you're right. Particularly if I explain it correctly. If I mock it and I just say, you're just a weak little bug, they don't like it. But if I explain it correctly, then they're like, yeah, you're right. I'm a tough little bug. And there's nothing wrong with that, actually. It's very powerful. It's very cool. So this is why the moon is debilitated there, though. Again, certain planets have a lot of power there, mainly the sun, Mars, and Jupiter. They take that difficulty, and again, if you go into a hole in order and you stay there in order to really concentrate your energy on strengthening yourself and strengthening your vulnerabilities, then that quality of Scorpio being in the hole and being self-protective at first is just enormously strong, and again, enormously powerful. This is why Mars is powerful there. He's the ruler. Jupiter, again, because then we expand beyond just that first, initial psychological response. And again, the sun, you take the sun inward and you concentrate it inward that way, and you go inward and you reflect that sun inwardly, then it expands all of that. Because we all have to go inward eventually. And Scorpio has a natural ability to do that and to concentrate, right? So you can see why those planets, and also, by the way, Ketu. Ketu is maybe the strongest. Ketu is certainly the strongest in Scorpio. Ketu is not, there's no question about it, that Ketu in Scorpio is the best place for it. I don't think any other sign is even close. Because, again, that Ketu is where we drill down into something with enormous focus and concentrated effort and psychology. And again, that kind of nature is great for Scorpio because that's what Scorpio is doing. That's this kind of this obsessive quality. And again, they're obsessed with, first of all, not being stepped on by big animals, again, as a matter of survival. But then seeing that and wanting to try to control their environment, then they become obsessed with becoming stronger. And again, that can be physically stronger, but eventually, because they're an emotional water sign and they're very devotional, it can become deeply, as I say, deeply devotional and deeply spiritual. And this is where that nature of Ketu, as being really the main moksha karaka, or the main indicator of liberation, makes Scorpio so powerful. And Scorpio makes Ketu so powerful. And when I say moksha karaka, I mean literal moksha. I don't mean pseudo-spiritual, new age moksha where, oh, I'm free, I'm liberated, free. That's really not what moksha feels like most of the time. That's a kind of emotional sort of high, which is nice, but it's really just another emotional, it's another vasana to want to be free. I mean real moksha. Moksha like letting go of everything, cutting things out that are not supporting our highest good. That's what real moksha is, and that's what Ketu is concerned with. In fact, that's the only thing Ketu is concerned with. He wants to push everything else, reject everything except that one thing, that only thing that is leading beyond all of this. So this is the nature of Ketu, to focus like a laser, like a pointed laser on just that one thing and that only thing that brings liberation. So again, that kind of obsessive focus is both the nature of Ketu and the nature of Scorpio. So again, I'm talking about these things because this eclipse is in Scorpio, which is obsessive over, becoming strong, transforming that poison. They carry the poison in the tail, but transforming that poison into something that is truly powerful and beyond form. So Ketu brings that, and so does Scorpio. But again, you can see why the moon part of us, which just wants to feel good primarily, the moon is just your emotions and how you feel. The moon part of us does not really want to get into all that. The moon has really no desire to feel vulnerable and do all this. And that's not what the moon wants to do. Again, the moon part of you wants to feel good and will try to do anything to feel good. Oh, there's people that like me. Yay, I want to be around them. Oh, there's stuff that I enjoy eating this food. I like them. I don't like them. I want to be around the ones I like. That's the moon. And it takes a lot of effort to get out of that. And so, again, it's not the only thing that the moon does. Again, because if you have, planets that join the moon, and like, let's say in your natal chart or whatever is influencing your moon can bring a lot of power in that regard. Like if someone has Mars on their moon or Saturn on their moon or Ketu on their moon or something in the natal chart, then they'll be more then they'll naturally be more acclimated towards being motivated emotionally just beyond feeling good and feeling comfortable. However, that thing on their moon is always going to be there. So even though it'll give them that power, like for example, I have Saturn aspecting my moon. So even though it gives me that power to be alone and to concentrate and to not get seduced by too much, not gravitate too much toward things just because they make me feel good or whatever. There's also the other side is that I don't often, maybe feel as good as others, or that part of my life is not as important. So again, both of the things happen. And so you want to understand that the moon, though, the reason that these dignities exist, the reason there's the exaltation in Taurus and in Kritika is because naturally we want to feel peaceful. We want to be able to gather things. We want to be able to reflect inward. And that comes naturally in Taurus. And Scorpio, it doesn't. Scorpio is restless. And the moon part of us doesn't really enjoy being triggered. And again, moon in Scorpio is an archetype of things like jealousy and being triggered and having that be a very emotional thing, where our emotions, the moon is really our emotional reactivity. So when someone has that in their natal chart, that's just the kind of vibration of their moon and their emotions. Their emotions are always a little bit worried and feeling vulnerable and triggered and a little paranoid and jealous and, I don't know. Well, I'm not sure what that means. Well, what does that mean? So whatever the moon is doing, it's kind of our default emotional response and what we feel emotionally comfortable with. So again, when it's Taurus, our default response is usually like, oh, it's okay. It's this. I'm not looking for things to be vulnerable and triggering and paranoid. When moon, for example, is in Scorpio, the default response to things that are uncomfortable or whatever is, oh, it must mean this, it must mean that, is to have that sort of triggering go on. And so that's why. So this eclipse is with this debilitated moon, very powerful K2. Again, as I said, the sun is also there, which is really strong in Scorpio because it has the strength and the clarity to illuminate those dark holes in our mind and psyche and whatnot. And Mercury is also there, which I'll talk about in a second. Denise Salim says, hit the like button, y'all, please. Thank you, Denise. I'm going to take a drink here. I always forget to say that, even though I have that thing up there. But so, yeah. Now, again, the solar eclipse is when the sun, moon, and earth line up in three-dimensional space, and the moon blocks out the sunlight as it comes to the earth. So what we have is this situation where the sun's light is being blocked by the moon. So it creates even this eclipse that is like a narrow, sort of like magnifying glass. This is the way I call it. It's like when you hold a magnifying glass up to the sun. That's one of the ways that I explain K2 as well. Like when you hold a magnifying glass up to the sun, the magnifying glass literally turns the sun into like a laser, right? And that's sort of what K2 is. Think of how dispersed sunlight is, and then you hold up a magnifying glass and all that sunlight gets focused like a laser. That's kind of what K2 is. So I've often used the analogy or the example of a solar eclipse is kind of like it's doing that to the sun. It's sort of concentrate, especially if it's with K2 or even sun K2 in general, even in a natal chart. Because again, sun K2 is kind of like that sun burning a hole in something. Now you can imagine, again, we're living here in life on Earth. And when you take a magnifying glass and burn holes in things, they burn. But again, that's kind of what K2 is. It's like this relentless focus. And so what we're seeing here now is that the sun is beaming the light down to the earth. And the moon is almost kind of like that sort of a magnifying glass but it's kind of opposite, because rather than taking the sunlight and focusing it, it's kind of blocking it out, but because all three bodies are in that same synchronous line, it's like this focused energy, this kind of like laser focus on these Scorpio themes that I'm talking about. Now, what you can expect to see, and what I want you to be noticing here in the next few days, is exactly what I was just talking about with regard to your emotions. This is why this month, this eclipse month, this month especially, is such a great experiment and case study in analyzing and noticing your emotional life, and noticing how even a couple weeks ago, even though it was a lunar eclipse, how embodied and how connected it felt, and how like again, it was almost like, there was a lot of emotional intensity and whatnot because the moon was with Rahu, and it was a full moon. Again, that's always what lunar eclipses are. They're full moons, so we're always full of it. But even though there was all of that, it was a opportunity to really perceive how much the emotions themselves are just a kind of conduit into deeper peace and something transcendent, and not just something to lose ourselves in and get all attached in and get all excited about the people and all this stuff that we tend to do. But no, it's like gratitude and calmness. And like I said, santosha, stability. A couple weeks ago on that eclipse. This one, notice how as we get closer to it, how much more restless it is. Again, now the moon is getting darker as I'm recording this. It's the 11th Tithi tomorrow, so it's the 10th Tithi today of the waning moon, Krishna Paksha. So we're only like 5 days away. If you look up in the sky, the moon is getting darker and darker. It's even past that last quarter. So it starts to get darker and darker and closer to its debilitation point. In fact, the day before, it's going to pass through the debilitation point. And I even mentioned in my December forecast in my November forecast, that the end of November was going to be really intense as the moon passes through this section of the zodiac and goes over Mars the next couple of days. And this week, you want to notice right now, the moon, as I record this on the 29th, it's in Virgo, Hasta. It was in Hasta today, or it's in Hasta today, pretty sure that's it. And Chitra tomorrow. Make sure that's right. I'm pretty sure it is. I only do forecast every day. Hasta today. In Chitra tomorrow, it goes Chitra, then it's going to go Swati, Vishaka, Anuradha, and then Jyeshta. So, but as it gets closer and closer, the moon is going to start going over this Mars. It's going to get darker and darker. And then especially on, what days would that be? I'm terrible with days. This is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. When we get to like Wednesday and Thursday of this week, you should really start to feel that like, that moon is feeling debilitated. It's feeling dark, debilitated. These are two of the balas of the moon. The two most important sources of strength for the moon are how bright it is and its dignity. Again, understand, the last lunar eclipse, the moon was as bright as it could be, and it was in its highest dignity, like to the degree. Right? Now, it happened when we had an eclipse, but again, a full moon in Taurus is as bright as it can be, which is first magnitude of strength, and in its exaltation sign, not an exaltation sign, but to the degree, it's like 3 degrees, as high as it can be. And this next one, like I said at the time, now the moon is going to be as dark as it can be, which is one of the first, if not the first, most important way to measure the moon and how connected to the heart we feel, is how bright it is and how dark it is. And it's going to be in the most difficult sign, which is Scorpio, where there's restlessness. And when we have the eclipse, it will have been in Scorpio for a day or so. It didn't just enter there. So even though it's past the exact debilitation degree, in some ways it's almost a little more, I think it's a little more difficult. because it's debilitated at 3 degrees. But when you get the moon and it's been in Scorpio for a couple days, it's almost like, particularly as it's a transit, right? Because we're living that. So this eclipse, this isn't going to feel so good. But the benefit here is that when this moon is dark, the dark moon, which includes the 13th and 14th tithi and the 15th of Krishna Paksha, as the moon gets darker, what it's really calling us to do is leave this worldly mind behind. The moon gets burned up in the sun, which literally means that our karmas, because the moon is where all the karmas are, your samskaras and your mental habits, you experience them as your emotions. Your emotions are generated through lifetimes. The Vedic astrology, dashas, the planetary cycles and all that, what they're doing is they are activating your karma. Your karma, don't think of it as something so complicated. Your karma is how you feel. It's in your mind. Nothing that complicated about it. Your karma gets all shaken up and then you do something, karma, action, and then it comes back and you keep doing it over and over again because that's the way you're programmed. Now, you don't have to stay programmed like that, but if you want to break the program, you have to do something different, like actual spiritual practice. Not just read things and all, but you need to like meditate and look and unravel higher layers within that mind, within that moon. Your first encounter with all of this is in the mind, in the moon, in the consciousness. In Sankhya philosophy, it's literally called Prakriti, which is the source of everything you create, is in your mind. So again, as the moon gets darker and darker, by the way, this happens every month. Every month, you're on this cycle. Every month, new moon, full moon, back to new moon, Your whole life revolves around these 30-day cycles. Those who've been listening to me for a while know I talk about this all the time. And so as the moon, every month, as the moon hits Krishna Paksha and gets those last few days of Krishna Paksha, you're being challenged to let go of your karma, your karmic story, your emotional story, emotional attachments, and all of that every month. That's why those last 2 tithis, especially the 14th and 15th, Shivaratri and Amavasya, are meant to be introspective, meant to be not a lot of external activity. Of course, we don't do that, but if we did, those are the times when your mind is the most able to concentrate. Why? Because all of that emotion is less at that time. It's literally less. As you get closer to a full moon and the moon is really bright, your mind is full of all of that stuff. And it's actually harder to see beyond all of the emotion at that time. So as we get near full moons, we're full of that emotion a lot more. As we get toward new moons like this, literally our attachment to all of that emotion is much less. That's why those times are the most conducive for meditation. By the way, this is why you also see a lot of Indian festivals, particularly the real spiritual ones, like Shivaratri and ones like the Divine Mother festivals and other ones, start on that first tithi when the moon is really dark and the cycle is starting over again, or the last tithi. Tithi just means the lunar phase. They happen and start at times when you can't see the moon in the sky. Literally, if you watch the moon the next few days, you'll see it'll disappear at some point. You won't be able to see it after like Thursday, Friday, like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it'll disappear. And what's supposed to happen is your mental, emotional mind is supposed to disappear at that time. And it's supposed to be reabsorbed into the Paramatman, into the supreme self of the sun. That's supposed to happen every month. So when we have an eclipse like this, it's very different because now, again, this moon is getting really dark. So your attachment to yourself as this identity, as this being who has lived this life and has all of these exciting emotions, I'm this person, yay, all of that stops feeling so good this week. As the moon gets darker, as it gets closer to debilitation, by the way, as it's passing through this section as well. Saturn is going to aspect it as well. Saturn puts an aspect over here. So this is just not going to feel so fun. So rather than just moan, cry, complain, and be a baby, try to meditate. Really. Try to just breathe, relax, calm down, surrender, let go. And it's not just a lecture, but the point is that the lunar phase itself is pulling you into doing that. So those of you who have good meditation practices, it'll be easy. And you'll in some ways want to like turn off all the media or not want to engage with people as much. It happens naturally. By the way, we don't have to put a lot of effort into it if we're sensitive. If we're sensitive, we naturally, as the moon gets darker, we want to go in anyway. As the moon gets brighter toward full moon, we actually want to engage more. As it gets darker toward the new moon, we actually want to withdraw. So again, go into that, as someone said, go into that Scorpio hole as we get around Wednesday, Thursday, and feel the beauty in that. Again, it's a beautiful place. It's not making fun of the Scorpion that lives in the hole, all safe and protected, and alone. You know, Scorpio and Scorpios or whatever are very functional alone as well. Again, sometimes they're alone though because they're afraid of involvement, so they push people away, and then they moan about why they're alone, and it can be a whole big complicated psychological thing that goes on. But in general, once they really evolve higher, they can be very functional alone and really value their own company, especially if they're devoted to something higher. I say they, we'll just say in general with Scorpio, the real highest promise of this sign is to connect with something that's transcendent, that helps you transcend the emotions into deeper devotion. And then being alone isn't some lonely psychodrama because no one understands me, and anytime I trust, I get screwed over, and this whole kind of dark, tragic comedy. It's not comedy. It actually, Scorpios could embrace more of the comic element, especially of themselves, and the idea that they just got to create the big, I'm so misunderstood. Oh, if anyone, and they've created all of it. They'll create it by themselves. You don't have to do anything. Or if you really want to see them create it, just try to be lighthearted around all of that, and you'll see. It's nothing funny. It's real. I swear. Anyway, so we do see that Mercury is here as well. And so Mercury also brings a lot of the lightheartedness, a lot of the flexibility, a lot of the creativity into things. Mercury and Scorpio, as it's actually really good for things like writing and being creative. And that includes things like trying something new, like what I'm saying here. If you're not used to doing meditations or things like that, or saying mantra, this is a great place when Mercury's in Scorpio for mantra, like elevating and deepening the function of speech and what you communicate, going deeper into it. So again, so that it's not just sort of trivial kinds of data. Because again, Mercury can just be data, so to speak, and what you do with the data. And the truth be known, Mercury for Scorpio is what's called a functional malefic. When someone has a Scorpio ascendant, or even in general, Mercury and Scorpio, we have to be careful because again, the nature of Scorpio is to focus on the dark side of things. And as a default position, literally, you want to understand that these signs are very deep kind of biases and projections and things like that. It's just kind of like a default vibration. So when Mercury's in Scorpio, Mercury, which is about details and the story that's going on and how we're trying to make sense of things, that story becomes very dark, suspicious. And again, often when Mercury's in Scorpio, let's say in a natal chart, or even now as it's moving, the story changes and becomes some conspiratorial dark story. And so that initial like emotional response to like worrying that maybe there's, someone trying to take advantage of you, or I don't know, looking and being suspicious or whatever. If Mercury's there, he'll put together all the pieces, because Mercury just kind of facilitates things. Oh yeah, there was that, there was this, and we think we're being so smart. So we got to be careful with Mercury and Scorpio in general, because a person can easily, like if that's in a natal chart or something like that, we can really use that to sort of confirm our dark fantasies. But again, the benefit is also that we can use the mind, and we can use that to see through all of that stuff and to have more discrimination. Again, this is why it can also be very good creatively. They make for some good stories. And again, if we can go to the higher octave of it and also get some detachment from the story and realize maybe that's just me and my story. Maybe I could look at the fact that I've told this dark, incorrect story a million times. How many times have I been wrong about the dark, incorrect story? Maybe I can have real Mercury discrimination and not just believe my own dark fantasies. How about that? Because that's also the highest level, the next level. And I can use that Mercury and Scorpio and that great imagination to like maybe write a good story and not live a bad story, live a bad, dark story, right? So, but I'm saying this also because with Mercury there, again, it's a little bit of disruption to some extent because it's quite close. But again, any sort of mantra practice that you might have, or singing kirtan, singing devotional music and things like that, could definitely be something that is supported. 1 second. And in particular, this is also in the nakshatra of Jyeshta, which is the part of Scorpio that is related to Lord Indra, who was the king of the gods. And Indra, especially in the Vedas, he was a great hero. In later Puranic texts, he was a little different. He was kind of like a bit of a bumbling king to some extent, not to cheapen it, but he was often a symbol of the ego and the corrupt king kind of run amok. And so it can be kind of both. Like in a worldly sense, we can overplay our hand and get emotionally triggered and get into emotional power struggles and kind of, sort of destroy our kingdom if we're not careful. Jyeshta has that quality of, it can be like a star of warfare, especially emotional warfare, emotional struggles, emotional battles. But in the highest sense, it's where we have the courage, again, to take on the struggle, to not run away. One of the great things about Scorpio in general is it's also a sign where, because we feel so much of that emotional pressure and intensity, we're not scared of other people's. We don't, like, for example, a Scorpio person who has a lot of planets there, particularly when they're very well embodied, they're some of the most loyal people. They won't run away just because things get difficult. They'll hang in there with you. They're not scared of like your darkness or something like that. They have a lot of emotional courage. And again, and they'll help you do battle against your demons and things like that. That's why in many ways, Scorpio is one of the most important signs for like healers and people who want to hold that difficult emotional space for others, to help them transform. Like all signs, we try to, do the thing that is hardest for us. And so, again, all these planets in Jyeshta brings out that higher potential. The one story from the Vedas that is really great with, as it relates to Lord Indra, is the story of how he allowed himself to be swallowed by the dragon who stole all the water. He stole the water from the earth, called Vritra. And Lord Indra had to go do battle with this celestial, like, monster dragon. And the only way that he could get and return the water to the earth was to allow himself to be swallowed. So he allowed himself to be swallowed by the dragon. And then he went down the dragon's throat. And then when he was in his belly, where all the water was, Indra cut open his belly and then returned all the water to the earth that way. Right. So it's really kind of a story that symbolizes that emotional, or, that courage to go into the deepest battle, even be swallowed up by it at times. But again, the thing to be careful of is that we don't just get swallowed up by the darkness, but we also cut ourselves out and get out of it, right? That's kind of, and Indra didn't do it because he just wanted to win. He did it for a higher cause. He allowed himself to be swallowed up and all of that because it was his duty as a king, and he had the courage, and he was doing it for something higher. Not just so that he could win, but so that he, again, was aligned with higher purpose. So again, it's a great symbol of how we need to fight those battles in alignment with something that's beyond just our shallow victory, or some kind of victory over some other person that we're in a power struggle with, particularly some emotional power struggle. So these are the things to really watch for in the next few days, and to really notice your capacity to transform the kind of toxic, uncomfortable feeling. And that toxic, uncomfortable feeling is going to be because ultimately, as the mind gets darker and darker, as the moon gets darker and darker, closer to this eclipse, you're going to feel less like you're this person in this body, living this life. Yes, this is me, and I'm this person, and it feels good to have all the connections. And it's like, who am I again? What is that again? Moon's going to pass over Mars. It's like, oh, everybody they bug me. I'm angry. Saturn's aspected. I don't feel connected to my heart. And it goes into Scorpio. I'm triggered. Who am I? Am I growing? What am I doing here? This is really what your mind is about. This is what your mind is. By the way, you should understand, people that meditate all the time, or like yogis and other people, they don't go through this kind of trauma every time these things happen. What this means to them, literally all of these difficult transits where we're like, oh, why am I so hurt? To the monk, to the yogi, they're like, oh, this is great. I don't know. And, nobody wants to talk to me, by myself. I can really concentrate. And that energy of Scorpio and that hole and the K2 and Saturn is just like, oh man, my mind is completely gone. All my emotions, I can concentrate. All that attachment, those emotions, those feelings, because they have them too. They have a mind. And to them, the last eclipse, where we were all like, oh, this is great. It's exalted. Blah, blah. I'm so, so content with myself, with my feelings in my world, and I'm content, blah, blah, blah. That's more distracting to them. They're like, I don't want that. I want to feel and realize that I'm not of this world. That's what I want. So for them, this kind of stuff is the holy grail. This is what they're dying for. They're like, yes, give me some of this, as Laura said. Laura said, yes, leave me alone so I can meditate. Yeah, that's what this can feel like. But again, if you don't ever meditate, if you don't have any, and I mean really do it, if you don't ever negate your mind and emotions and see yourself as not just this emotional creature who wants to be happy, who judges your life by all the people around you, the connections, how happy you are, whether or not you feel good about everything. If you don't ever encounter your being beyond all of that, then these kinds of things can be very painful. But they're not painful because they're bad. They're painful because you don't know that part of yourself. And you better, because it's real. In fact, it's more real. It's more real than the cultivated noise that we call happy or whatever. And so we just live to distract ourselves from the kind of power that we're going to be getting in the next few days. So remember it like that. Our whole life is often to distract ourselves from the kind of power and ability to concentrate that we're going to be getting in the next few days as we get closer to this. It's not going to feel so good, but it's going to be real. And yeah, Laura also said, bring on the kirtan. This is another thing. This is one of my great connections, music. Like I can sit by myself and just sing like to Shiva and all this. And in 2 seconds, I'm just not in the, I'm like, again, and it's not emotional. Like, I mean, there'll be like a smile and there'll be some tears coming down and stuff, but it's not because it's just it's like a physical response, but it's actually just a communion with silence. More than anything, it's just silence. Like it's just not of this world. And many times the music, the kirtan part, the singing and the mantra and the sound is just the thing that takes you there. And that'll go for a while. And then that's done. And then it's just total peace and totally absorbed, like absorption in the soul, in the self. And that's what it is to have the moon burned up in the sun, the moon burned up in that fire of truth and reality, because usually the moon, the emotions and all that is there. It's there all the time. It's very hard to have that feeling of being alive and of this and that, have that calm down. It's hard to do it. So by the way, every new moon brings that promise, especially every K14 and K15. But when we get an eclipse, particularly with all that intensity of Scorpio and with K2 there, man, that's like, boy, that's bringing the juice. That's bringing the juice. And you got to, again, this is literally also when you hear things like transforming the poison into the elixir and blah, blah, blah. When you hear statements like that, this is what it means. It means this. Because this kind of stuff to your emotional mind feels like poison. Like, transforming that means not just jumping around like a crazy person because you're uncomfortable. It means going deeper, and that same power that feels like poison to the uninitiated is the great elixir. It's the thing you'd die for. It's the thing you'd give everything for. But you got to be able to sit with it. If you can't, it's poisonous and whatnot. So just to keep that in mind, I want to just talk again really quick about before we end here, about this web class. Again, this free web class to 2022 Vedic forecast, eclipses, retrogrades, important shifts, and what does Jupiter and Pisces mean for you also for the next, from April 13th of 2022 until April of 2023. So again, these 10 really powerful shifts are happening. And this will be a great way for you to really connect with the upcoming year and be ready for these 10 shifts. Like I said, at the end of last year, so many were predicting how terrible it was going to be and all this stuff. And it was definitely an improvement by almost every objective standard. Again, there's a lot of great stuff in 2022, especially if you're not just completely triggered and hypnotized by all the stuff going on externally. In fact, even a lot of that is going to really calm down. We're going to get much more grounded in things. So just real quick, a couple other things. Again, a few things that are happening. We're right on the verge of Venus going retrograde here soon. So Venus is in Sagittarius. So again, that's quite devotional as well. Great devotional opportunities are right around the corner. Venus is about where we find beauty and happiness. Sagittarius is in higher teachings and whatnot. At times, it can be difficult for our romantic relationships or even some friendships because our standards are a little bit higher. So keep that in mind, but find beauty in great teachings and whatnot. Again, Mars is also still in Libra. It's about the change. So again, this is also where things are a little difficult for our relationships right now because, again, Libra is about wanting to compromise. Mars is about, no, it's about me kind of thing. So Mars is right on the verge of also leaving and going into Scorpio. So even after this eclipse, you can really use this eclipse as a springboard toward deeper spiritual practice, because then Mars is going to go into Scorpio for the rest of the year. Mars, K2 in Scorpio, Mars, K2 Sun for a big part of it. Well, for at least, about another 10 days after the eclipse. But Mars, K2 in Scorpio for the rest of this year is actually really delivering the capacity for the transformation I was just talking about. To abide in the stress of not being able to control everything, and instead of getting triggered, really being able to sit in solitude and stillness with that courage to transform yourself rather than get into sort of crybaby scenarios about how you're a victim and then battling with others over this stuff. That's the lowest part. That's the lowest thing that Scorpio does. Mars K2 will be in Scorpio from early December to the end of the year. Really a great time to strengthen the self. K2 going through Scorpio has been very powerful since September of last year. So it's been good for the Scorpios, a nice kind of clearing and a shedding of skin. So that energy is going to continue. By the way, whether you have planets there or not, I don't even have planets there, but we're all of these energies. So we're here to integrate and embody all of these energies. Of course, Saturn continues through Capricorn, bringing that concentration and that concentrated effort toward where you're going in your life and your deep commitments. And Jupiter now pretty much established in Aquarius, helping to restore a sense of purpose and inspiration to us all. Again, like I did an update a few days ago about how this Jupiter is now completely cleared Capricorn, which is really the end of a cycle that began right as we started getting locked down last year. Right when that happened, in the middle end of March, that's when Jupiter went into Capricorn, and then he went up, he went out, and then back. We're past that phase where he's not going to go back into that Capricorn with Saturn again, and there's that kind of dark, cloud hanging over us. And so we're going to be feeling this expansion continue, Jupiter through Aquarius, really trying to connect us more to each other socially. And then he goes into Pisces, like I said, in the 2022 forecast. Jupiter in Pisces, very mystical, very spiritual, pure spiritual, beyond even sort of religious. And so a lot to look forward to. But again, I give it to you straight. It's not going to be all flowers and sunshine, but you don't have to be like, oh, it's going to be so terrible. It's important to understand what the power is. And really the power of this is the rarefied kind of power that is beyond just enjoying life and really being able to ascend and transcend a lot of the attachments that just keep us stuck. And we'll be feeling that power the end of this week as we get closer to that Scorpio eclipse. And so Laura said, thank you, Sam. You're welcome, Laura. Laura actually also took the great step. She's been saying she's Scorpio and whatnot. She actually signed up for my certification course, really stepping up and learning about these qualities of life. And again, this is what we're all supposed to know, this knowledge, and have this knowledge and this spiritual wisdom. And people taking a chance to really learn about the nature of life instead of just, things are just kind of happening and thinking that just listening to a video here and there is going to make a big difference. You make a big difference based on how you really commit to things and your concentrated efforts. That's why this Saturn going through Capricorn has been so powerful as well. So a lot of planets really powerful now. Saturn in its own sign, K2 and Rahu are also what you would call dignified or exalted or in their own signs. And also Mars is about to go there. So, but these are intense energies, and they're meant to give us the power to do intense things. So we'll leave it at that, folks, and you have a good one.